So, as Sarah said, between you and a break and a Bartlett, so I'll keep it on track. Bit of an introduction before we get into things. Censornet are a mid-market cybersecurity company. We do email, web security, CASB, data loss prevention, and training, and a bunch of other things. I want to talk today a little bit around the things we control. Obviously, you've heard a lot today around external threats, ransomware, targeted attacks on a business. I want to touch on something that is a little bit more in our control, and that's the data that we hold, what we do with it. So, we very much focus on the left-hand side of this chart, right? The bad guys trying to get into the business. But quite often, we defocus on the things we control, the insider threat, and I think Ian talked about it quite eloquently earlier. I'm not going to try and compete with that, but effectively, what our users are doing within the business, doing their day-to-day jobs. People, Steve in accounts, Jenny in marketing, just want to do their job with the least friction possible. So it's that constant balance, as we just heard, around security versus usability. There are some really big contributing factors at the moment, and I talked about this a little bit the last time we were here at this event, and that's the stresses that are that environmental factor that we in the UK see really heavily, and that's really around talent and both acquisition and retention of really good skilled staff. The shortage in the UK is phenomenal at the moment. It's 14 to 15,000 people, places that we have open, and the knock-on effect in that to us guys in IT is very much, it's opening up opportunities for failure. So we're the first guys that get it in the neck, because we say when something goes wrong in a business, someone can't access a cloud application or their email, the first person they pick up to the phone to is us. So, we really need to think about how we can use the tools to help security operations in doing their job, and the users are a big part of that. One thing that Gartner called out, and I referred to this last time as well, is the impact of hybrid or remote working. The home user, bring your own device, consumer applications and storage that's in use. It takes exponentially longer and costs us so much more money when you're dealing with threats that are not wedded to a location like an office. When you're at home, we've all got mobile phones that we might or might not have passcodes on, or multi-factor authentication. There are things we need to do and enforce as a business, and Gartner on top of that. Now, I'm in tech, I'm not a slideware, so I'll kind of walk you through. This is some data that we've pulled from our system from a customer who is in healthcare. They handle some pretty sensitive data. We were doing a proof of concept with them over about 2 weeks. And this was just to kind of, at the end of that 2 weeks, show them exactly what their users were doing. What data they were accessing, what systems they were posting information to. And there was quite a lot of things that they said, yeah, we know, we get that. We have a sanctioned app. In this case, it's OneDrive. But when we looked at actually where the risk profile lies, there are a few things that, there was a sharp intake of breath when we said, well, actually, this was actually thousands and thousands of documents that have gone on through web chats for things like WhatsApp and messaging, email attachments through, non-sanctioned things like Gmail, personal Outlook. But what really opened their eyes was this 25%. It was about 100,000 instances of file uploads to an unsanctioned SaaS storage. When we dug down deeper into that, it's consumer-grade file sharing. It's one of my favorites. I love PDF. You're sending a Word document or a PowerPoint up to the web to be converted into a PDF, at which point you've lost control over it. You have no audit trail. Who's got access to it? Who knows? Things like WeTransfer, MediaFire, I was quite surprised to see up there. But effectively, they were quite surprised at what they saw. So what do we do about this? What actions can we take? Really, there are a couple of tips, probably three here, I think. Firstly, it's about developing, before you even get into the tech and the digital, what are you going to write as far as policies that then you can deliver to your salespeople with the least amount of friction to do their jobs again? So, creating training that matches your fair use policies, none of the kind of more generic stuff. It's about building things up from the foundation, as kind of Ian said earlier on, right? It's not Jenny in marketing's job to be cybersecurity, right? It's not what she gets paid for. Yes, she needs to be aware of it, and that's the kind of key thing in SAT, right? It's awareness training. I kind of understand how an aeroplane works. I'm not going to get in and drive the damn thing. So, we need to enable that to make sure that they don't then go and try ways to, make their jobs easier by doing things that are, out of policy. And, third thing, and I've had the occasion to kind of talk about this a few times now, but we shouldn't forget the physical environment that we're in at the moment. How many times I've sat in a Starbucks or a Costa waiting for a coffee in the morning after I've walked the dogs, and there's someone sat there with a headset on doing an internal Zoom call at the top of their voice. They then get up to pick up their skinny decaf frappuccino without locking the laptop, without walking away. It would be very easy to take a quick photograph and create some phenomenal phishing attack, and to not that I have done, I hasten to add, but it is that easy. So we talked about the actions that we can kind of take. What about the tools that we need to kind of take? And you've heard a lot already about some of the tools, but again, it should be more focused on what are the tools that I can control within the business, as well as the things that are stopping the bad guys getting in from the outside, right? So one thing that we focused on over the past year or so is around data loss prevention, or as I call it, data leak prevention. I think when you talk about data loss, that kind of implies that it's gone forever. You don't have a backup. Well, we should have a backup, right? This is around data inadvertently getting out, and that's whether somebody's put something on a shared drive that they shouldn't have. It's an email attachment trying to do their job. We've got this digital ecosystem of supply chain partners, agencies that we work with, all using different tools. We don't necessarily want to use a black and white, allow this, block this. There needs to be a nuance around that because your partners may use a different tool you want to download stuff from, but perhaps not upload stuff from if there's a level of sensitivity. So DLP or data loss prevention is really about building on top of web security and email security and CASB by giving you the ability to look at the content and the context of that data that is going up. So we're not just blocking the file. We're not saying, well, you can't access OneDrive or Dropbox or Box, but we're saying you can't upload a file if it contains a certain amount of content. And DLP, we're a startup. We don't develop our own stuff. We license the kind of gold standard stuff. But effectively, you can look at 60, 70 different languages of personally identifiable information. So if I'm a UK company, I want to check if someone's put a passport number up in an Excel spreadsheet and try to send it, it gets blocked straight away. I live just outside of Cheltenham, and one of the grammar schools you may have seen in the press recently, along with some in London, had a huge data breach where some of their students with special education needs had all their data put out on the dark web from effectively a misconfiguration. That is extremely sensitive information that you don't, as a parent, want to have get out. So, combined with things like GDPR, it's, you don't want to be having those groveling apologies that you need to make. So this is a key tool for that. And secondly, one thing that you'll hear, if you haven't heard already, you'll hear more about posture management. So there are some acronyms, CSPM, SSPM. So this is posture management of SaaS applications and cloud infrastructure. So, beyond the user, when we talk earlier about the pressure on us in IT, I was talking to a client last week who is in gaming, online gambling. They have 4 open recs for security operations in a team of 8, including management. So they're 50% down. Obviously they've got a high workload. They're worried that things might slip through the net from an IT admin perspective, not necessarily an end user perspective. So posture management gives you the ability to go out to things like your AWS S3 bucket or your Salesforce account and make sure that it's configured correctly, that you don't have a share that has no password on it or something that you've got shared externally without the right permissions. It's something that you need to think about as we move forward beyond just things like web, email, and CASB. So you've got all these shiny new tools. How do we get the best out of them? And the guys at Sentinel previously mentioned this, but how do you integrate in a single pane of glass all these newfangled tools? And we've done this in the best way we think is possible, and I'll touch on it in a second. But by being able to integrate the different point solutions, you might have a best-of-breed email vendor, and then a web filter, and then cloud application security. But if they don't talk to each other, they're useless when it comes to you as an operator. Being able to look at 3 different portals and log in and log out and transfer telemetry is a key thing. So integration is key, and that's something that we've looked heavily on. And then there's the role of AI. We've done AI to death today, I think, so I'm not going to talk about ChatGPT or anything like that. But I think you'll start to hear more as we move forward. We've touched on DLP training, cloud security, and this is Gartner's research. One thing that moves up year after year after year is this one about automation, and AI and machine learning is a big part of that. We've taken a couple of thousand ML algorithms. We've trained a system to look at the threats that come from whatever channel, whatever vendor. We can sit there in the middle and kind of pull it all together. But why integrate? When you take aside the stuff that Gartner is saying at the moment around consolidation from a cost and an operational perspective, you think about the threats that are coming in today. Most of them start with an email, but very, very quickly it's a URL in a phishing attack that you click on and it takes you off to a cloud storage to deliver a payload. You need to be aware at every point along that attack chain that you can intelligently block something. So that's something we use machine learning for with a platform we call ACE. So ACE, our autonomous security engine, is effectively an orchestrator that sits underneath email, web, and CASB and DLP, and it looks to our own channel. So if an email comes in, we can quite quickly take some intelligence from it and pass it out to a CASB solution. So if that same threat came in through a different channel, well, we already know about it, even if it's kind of new in the wild. But it's also about communication between the other products out in the industry as well. So, not only is it talking to, SIEM source systems, it's also, talking to endpoint, Defender on the endpoint, or CrowdStrike, or whoever vendor of choice is. We know there are experts in every field, and we can't do everything. But let's at least enable people to talk to each other and communicate in an intelligent way. We can't do that through staffing. ML and automation is the way to do that. And you think about it, you've got all these great point products. It's kind of like the old velociraptors in Jurassic Park poking away at the threat. At some point, you're going to see a gap, and the fence is going to fall down. You need to be able to kind of pull all these together and at least communicate between yourselves. So hopefully, Sarah, we're happy I've kept that on track.
You've got a couple of minutes.
Well, I'll carry on for a little bit then, thank you. So look, I hope it was a little bit of a tease. I'm here not to necessarily talk product specifically, but hopefully, you can kind of see the value and you kind of come away with some insights as to what we're about. So we are very much focusing on mid-market. We've got the guys who we compete against at the top end, like the Zscalers and the Ciscos of this world. But most of our expertise and our clientele is in healthcare, education, mid-market, not-for-profits, and obviously they see the value. They don't necessarily have these big enterprise budgets to be able to go and buy individual point products. So they definitely see value in not only the cost savings but the level of integration that we can put in with our innovation. So we're outside. Come and say hi. I'd love to have a further chat. And with that, I'll let you go for your break. Thank you.